If you're like me, you've probably starting to think about your long-term health. And I worry about the risk of disease and how it increases as we get older. Now, what if many of the diseases we fear have one thing in common and we can influence it with food? So I'm going to talk to you about what that one thing is and how food plays a role in reducing that one thing, and as a result, reduce the risk of a lot of different diseases that we are faced with as we get older. Okay, so what is that one thing? Well, it is chronic systemic inflammation. Let me tell you what that is and where it comes from. So we've got kind of two types of inflammation, and both are triggered and they both occur when the immune system is triggered. Now, there's acute inflammation and then there is chronic inflammation. You know the acute inflammation. You can tell. Let's say you have a cut on your hand, and that means that this barrier, the skin, which is a barrier that protects your body from all sorts of dangerous attack, is breached. And that's a trigger for your immune system to kick into gear and to protect you. And the way it does that is by sending various cells towards that area. It increases blood flow, which means that you can see it gets a bit red, it gets a bit swollen. It might even feel a little bit warm to the touch. And that's a good thing, because with the increased blood flow, more nutrients and other immune cells that follow will be sent to that area, which sort of turns into this healing cascade. And then after a while, that all disappears and it's healed. Now, of course, the main worry with acute inflammation is that bacteria will get into the wound, then through the wound into the bloodstream, and then those bacteria get into the bloodstream, which is not good. So that's what the main focus is for the immune system, is to stop these bacteria from getting further into the body. So that's not the kind of inflammation we're talking about. We're talking about something that is not something you can feel. It's not something that you can tell. It's often not even something that can be easily picked up in tests, and that is sort of low-grade chronic inflammation. So when and it gets triggered by, again, when there's things in your body or the danger of things in your body that are not supposed to be there. So a normal healthy immune system, the main focus is on, as I said, the acute, so like wounds, but also on fighting bacteria and viruses. So, you know, when you're exposed to a cold, to the cold or a flu virus, that triggers your immune system. But what most people don't know is that the immune system actually kicks into gear for a lot more than just viruses and bacteria. It will respond, the immune response will get triggered by anything that is in your body that is not supposed to be there. So not just viruses, not just bacteria, but also chemicals, toxins, microplastics. Microplastics are now of major concern, because we find that people are riddled with microplastic particles in the body. And anytime there's something in your body that's not supposed to be there, that triggers an immune response, because that's your immune system's job, is to remove anything that is not supposed to be in your body. And unfortunately, we are exposed to lots of chemicals and toxins on a day-to-day basis. You only have to walk out onto wherever you are, go for a little walk, and you'll be breathing in chemicals. If you live in a city, you'll be breathing in fumes. You will be breathing in, car exhausts. Those are called dioxins. But even if you're living in the country, where, for example, I live in a more rural area, but it's an agricultural area, there are chemicals in the air from the chemicals that farmers use to grow their crops. Again, we breathe it in. Those chemicals end up in the ground. Vegetables and fruits and plants soak that up, gets to the supermarket, we buy it. It's very hard to get rid of anything that's been sprayed, so we eat some of those. When we eat, those chemicals get into our bodies. We have things around us that are chemicals. We have lots of we've gotten really used to cleaning products that are chemical based. We have been sucked into the idea that it's better to have, instead of having sugar in your diet, to have things that are no sugar, but they have artificial sweetness. Well, those are chemicals. Those create more inflammation. We eat lots of sugar, which is also inflammatory, but on a slightly different way. But all these chemicals enter into the body, and of special concern at the moment are microplastics. And microplastics are, in many countries now, water bottles and food containers and no longer contain BPAs, which is a specific type of plastic. And we thought that solved the problem. And now we know that any plastic that gets in contact with liquid and or warm material, so warm food. So let's say you've batch cooked and you put your food into little plastic containers and it's still warm. That heat and liquid, and anything you cook will contain liquid, starts to release minute particles of plastic. And then when they come into your food, and when you eat it, you eat more microplastics. And there have now been microplastics found in fetuses, so it can cross the placenta. Now, I know you and I are of an age where we don't have to worry about that anymore, but we have found microplastics in the brain. And that means that they can cross the blood-brain barrier. But even if they're not in the brain, if they're in your body, if they're in your bloodstream, they will get into your bloodstream, because you eat the food, it gets into your gut, it gets digested, and they're so small that they can sort of hitch a ride with the food into your bloodstream. And they're constantly triggering the immune system. Same with anything chemical that you have that is in your food, and anything that you breathe in. So we are all constantly in a low-grade state of chronic inflammation. Now, that is a problem, because that increases the risk of so many diseases. A big one is cancers. Most cancers have an inflammatory component. So it's not necessarily the cause, but it will increase the risk. It's like it lowers the threshold for cancer to develop. Type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome are key diseases caused by chronic inflammation, but also when you have them, they increase chronic inflammation. So you get into this cycle of worsening disease. Heart disease. I'm going to do a separate video on heart disease and cholesterol, because chronic inflammation, and it's chronic systemic inflammation. So that means it's not just chronic, which means you have it all the time, but it's also systemic. So it means it's everywhere. Every tissue, every organ is in this constant state of low-grade inflammation. And it's a big issue for heart disease. but also Alzheimer's and dementia and just general cognitive decline. The brain is not immune to inflammation, and they're finding more and more that people have inflammation of the brain, joint issues, autoimmune conditions. There are so many diseases that even if they're not caused by inflammation, as I said, the threshold for it to develop is lowered because of chronic systemic inflammation. And you can't see it, you can't feel it. It's just that silent, hidden problem that is increasing your risk of whatever disease you are vulnerable to. And if you've gone through menopause, the changing of hormones, and in particular the loss of estrogen production, increases the susceptibility to inflammation as well. So there's some things that, as I said, a lot of that inflammation comes from just the world we live in, but it's also caused by, if you eat a highly processed diet with sugar, with refined carbs, that contributes, right? That they contain so many chemicals, additives, preservatives, all sorts of things that your body doesn't recognize as food, because they're chemicals, they're man-made, and that triggers the immune system. But another thing that contributes to inflammation is if you don't move enough. Your movement is one way that your body cleans up, and it supports your immune system to clean things up and get rid of various problematic additives to our bodies. Chronic stress. Stress is really an inflammatory, I'm about to say disease, but it causes a lot of inflammation. So if you have chronic stress, that's one thing to work on. If you don't get enough quality sleep, because part of the role of sleep is to support your body and the various systems to reset, to recover, and to do what it needs to do. And as I said, a big component nowadays is just the world we live in. Toxins in and on your food, microplastics from water bottles, food containers, even packaging. Everything seems to come in plastics. It's covered in plastic. And even if you think like meat, it comes, well, at least here, most of the meat now is in those vacuum sealed packaging. But that means that every part of the meat is in contact with plastic, and meat has liquid in it, so it is, as it sits there, it's constantly absorbing plastics. I'm very worried about plastics. I think you might be able to tell. So I think we should just assume that we all have chronic low-grade inflammation. What can you do about it? How can you reduce it so that you reduce the risk of disease? And there's things you can do, fortunately. And it doesn't have to stop you from going outside. What we want to do is minimize as much as we can the attack on your body that will trigger the immune system. So a big strategy is to eat whole, unprocessed foods, if you can, organic. If you can't, you have to realize that you are eating a lot of, while you eat, you're ingesting a lot of herbicides, fungicides, so chemicals. But if you eat a mostly unprocessed diet, that really will help. Some key foods to think about is vegetables and leafy greens. They contain lots of fiber, and fiber is it's like the broom to clean up whatever it needs to be cleaned up. So it gets rid of a lot of, helps to get rid of a lot of stuff. Also, especially if you look at lots of different colored vegetables, so plus leafy greens, you get lots of phytonutrients. So they are they're tiny little powerhouses of fighters that you can add to your system, and they really help with cleaning up and getting rid of the things that do harm. Things like berries and low sugar fruits, although berries are very, if you love berries, they're very important to eat organic because they are so small. The relative surface area is actually quite large. If you eat a handful of berries, that has a lot more surface area than an apple, for example, even if it's the same amount. And that means that you have a lot of surface area that has been sprayed. And it's very difficult to get the spray off fruit and vegetables because the spray is put in a waxy sort of solution so that it doesn't rain off. So it means that just simply rinsing it underwater is not going to be very helpful. It can help to have a 20% vinegar or 20% salt solution with water, so 20% vinegar and 80% water, 20% salt, water, and get the vegetables and the fruits to soak in that for a while, and then rinse it for about 20 minutes, and then rinse it off. That gets rid of a lot more of the whatever's been sprayed on it. Very important also, third thing, so we've got lots of differently colored vegetables, leafy greens, berries, and low sugar fruits. Remember in a previous video I talked about that you also always should have some nuts or seeds or something with protein and fats to go with your fruits to balance your blood sugar level. Healthy fats, extra virgin olive oil, avocado, nuts, coconut oil, those are also very anti-inflammatory. Fatty fish like salmon, tuna, mackerel, sardines, they are very high in omega-3 fatty acids, and we know that those are anti-inflammatory. There are some herbs and spices that are anti-inflammatory: turmeric or curcumin, I can never say it properly, ginger, garlic. They are very helpful to reduce inflammation. And fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, they help with gut health, and that is very important for your immune system. I will make a separate video about gut health though, because it deserves a lot more attention than what I'm giving it here. And then it's important to drink a lot of water. I recommend you filter your water because it takes out any chemicals. I don't know where you are in the world, but I know here in Australia they put chlorine in the water, and I avoid chlorine in any shape or form, to the point that I don't go to public swimming pools anymore because chlorine is a neurotoxin. And when you smell it, it means you breathe it in. It's also why, besides the fact that I can't use any chemicals to clean my tiny house because the water just goes onto the grass and into my worm farm, but I also don't want to have these toxins around. I personally think, I haven't researched it really, but I personally think that it will contribute. If you have a risk of Alzheimer's, anything to do with the brain, I think chlorine is something to avoid. But just in general, I prefer to avoid it. That was a side issue. And avoid any pro-inflammatory foods. So that's junk food. That is any food that's been pre-prepared. Things like sausages, even if you have meatballs that have been pre-seasoned. I mean, it will often, if you look at the ingredients, it will have some chemical, some additives, colorants, preservatives, and these are all chemical, these are all human made. So what are some simple things you can do starting today? What you can do every day is add one anti-inflammatory food to each meal. So if you have a very narrow range of vegetables, for example, in your meal, add another vegetable to it. You want to end up with at least 15 different vegetables a week, so that you provide variety. Make sure that you eat the healthy fat. So if you use margarine, swap it out for oil. Just butter is much healthier, and I will talk about that at some point as well. I love, instead of butter or anything, if I have a sandwich, I always put avocado on as my butter, if you like. If you eat processed snacks, on every day start to cut one. So if you like eating biscuits, just take one out and replace it with something like some nuts, maybe a boiled egg, which will actually make you feel much fuller than if you have a biscuit, some vegetable sticks with some hummus or some other natural completely homemade dip, that sort of snacks. To give yourself a real boost of lots of different healthy, good nutrients to fight your inflammation, create a vegetable-rich soup or curry and do a batch cook so that you always have that available. I always have some of those portions in my freezer, and they're easy to cook in large quantities. Just don't freeze them in plastic. So I have moved to glass containers. I don't put anything in plastic anymore, but yeah, so batch cook a big vegetable soup and go use vegetables that are in season. There's problems with trying to eat things out of season. There are also some things that you could, if you like your tea and you like herbal tea, something like turmeric tea, or even adding a bit of ginger to a tea, it can be really helpful because it's very anti-inflammatory. So chronic inflammation may be silent and you may not know you have it, but go on the assumption that you have chronic systemic inflammation. That doesn't mean you can't do anything about it, and that's the good thing. You don't need a perfect diet. You just need to start making small changes to make it less, to reduce the burden on your body and to increase the range of nutrients, and that will support your immune system. Imagine your poor immune system where you have chronic inflammation. It's like you have a constant, you need to keep a constant fire going that constantly needs more wood for your poor immune system to keep functioning, to keep doing what it's doing. And it's never going to, it never gets to a point where it goes, oh, okay, I'm done. So we need to support the immune system so that it functions optimally and not add to the burden that it needs to deal with. So make sure smart little changes and over time that really will add up. So tell me, what is one thing that you're going to try to add or to remove from your diet this week with the clear purpose of reducing your chronic systemic inflammation? Now, if you enjoy these kind of videos, make sure you subscribe so that every time I publish one, you'll be notified. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.